My guest today is Carter Serrett. Carter is a CEO with Recovery Centers of America, newly appointed, and it's a new position. Welcome to the Element Q podcast. I'm your host, TJ Woodward, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for this empowering journey. Each week, we shine a light on the authors, thought leaders, therapists, coaches, and healers of all types who are making a difference in the LGBTQ plus community. Together, we honor those who came before us, the courageous and resilient trailblazers who stood for our rights and recognition. Their strength laid the foundation we stand on today. Here, we celebrate their legacy by diving into the stories, insights, and tools that inspire gentleness, healing, and transformation. So get ready to be uplifted and empowered. This is the Element Q podcast. Carter, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, TJ.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to diving in. I know that you have recently started a new position. I've known you for many, many years working in both leadership and clinical and behavioral health. And I know one of your greatest passions is working with the LGBTQ plus community. And of course, like always, we had a conversation in the green room, which basically just meant before we hit record, to kind of talk about what's in your heart, what's on your mind. And a couple of topics came up. One that seems to reoccur in these conversations on our podcast, and that is the role of shame and how shame drives a lot of behavior, both in the clients we work with and in our own journey. So maybe we start there. I think that's an interesting place to start. I know you also have a passion for talking about chemsex. Someone watching or listening might not even know what that is. So maybe you can choose which one of those two you want to start with.
Wow. Okay. So we're starting right in the deep end.
Yeah, of course. I always dive in the deep end and then go from there.
Wonderful. So much of my work has been about shame. My clinical work has been about shame. Originally, when I got into recovery myself, I had been working in a completely different field and decided to change everything that I was doing, including my career and my focus. And I was really driven to give back in the way that was given to me. And what that was people helping me get out of chemsex addiction. And for those that don't know, chemsex is the way I describe it, is a perfect storm or tornado of chemical dependency, some form of chemical dependency, and some form of either sex addiction, or some might refer to it as problematic sexual behavior. Those things combined creates this experience where sex can kind of light up the addiction to the chemical substance. What kind of sex can good sex, bad sex, no sex, any of it can really light it up. And then the use of the drug can also light up the desire for more and more around the sexual addiction stuff. And so it makes it's really not like it is with other substances, where we can go into a treatment facility, we can spend 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it is, and then come out, and as long as we don't use and we continue to do right things and form a community, get honest with ourselves and with other people, we're going to sustain recovery, or we have a good chance at sustaining recovery. When your addiction story is linked to sex, oftentimes that's not addressed at all,
right,
while you're in treatment. And so it becomes this landmine when you come out of what am I going to do to stay safe? Like if I haven't explored it in treatment, it's trial and error, and oftentimes people end up relapsing and coming back into treatment because it hadn't been addressed. And so
yeah, and I think it's such an important conversation and so layered. There are two different roads I want to go down. One is shame itself as a driver of this. And I'm not just talking about the behavior. I'm also talking about what you're speaking to, which is vitally important, and that is that it gets addressed in treatment.
Mm.
What I mean by that is I have found that a lot of times even clinicians aren't comfortable talking about sex. And I always, when I go into a treatment program and train clinicians, I will say, if you are not talking about sex with your clients, I don't think we're actually doing treatment because most people are sexual beings. I mean, a very high percentage, right?
Right.
And maybe even more so when we're talking about gay men specifically, or a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community. And obviously, it's not just within our community, but it does seem to be heightened that there is something that's connected there, especially if we're talking about crystal meth and we're talking about shame that drives the
Mhm.
use that's connected with the sex. And then we use terms like sex addiction or problematic sex and like what does that mean? How do we unpack that? And I always want to say there's not a one size fits all. And what I've seen is this really old school yet pervasive idea. I've literally heard therapists and counselors say to their clients, "Well, just don't have sex." Well, that's fine, except for is that really what they're going to do? And if they are not going to do that, then they're going to go into shame and secrecy. And then we have a whole other layer of situations that we need to unpack.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's very much one size doesn't fit all, regardless of what you're talking about. Like telling people just not to have sex doesn't work. Telling people, I had a doctor in early recovery who is a gay male doctor tell me that I had told him I was in a monogamous relationship, and he said, that's not normal. It's not normal for a gay man to be in a monogamous relationship. It's not normal for us not to have sex. We literally are programmed to spread our seed, is what he told me. And that wasn't my story, my experience, or my truth. And it really turned me off to talking about my sex life and my sex experiences with gay professionals because I felt like I was going to be judged for coming into my recovery experience wanting monogamy, wanting kind of a different experience than what I had experienced before in my previous life.
Yeah. And isn't it fascinating that when we talk about norms, people will have a different idea about what that is. And I've heard people refer to a gay man who wants a monogamous relationship to being heteronormative, like, oh, you're just
Right.
trying to be like a straight person, right? Which isn't true. And it's also, by the way, not true for people in all different types of relationships, whether they're gay, bisexual, trans. We all get to decide for ourselves with our partner or partners what
Yeah.
we want in our sex life, right? What we want in our loving relationships. And to have it be, this is what's normal in either direction. It's funny. I don't know why I think it's funny, but even like the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says we avoid hysterical thinking or advice, right? Like
Mhm.
it's not this or this. It's really getting in touch with what works for the individual. And when someone's coming into treatment and they've been in like these chemsex situations, of course, we can say it makes most sense just to not do it for a while we get stabilized. But like, is that really what's happening? And then I've seen, I've worked with gay men many, many years, and I've seen relapse just because someone didn't know how to navigate creating a healthy, sober sex life. And they attributed all of their sex life back to using, and that became an automatic thing. They would go back to the same app in the same way, and they would find themselves using over and over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, with this treatment program that I ran in Northern California, we introduced a chemsex track into that program. And one of the things that the woman who did the most work on it, Lilia Ornelas, she created a sexit plan. So instead of an exit plan, it was a sexit plan where each individual had their own program for how they were going to address sex when they left. Are they going to still engage in the apps? How are they going to engage? What are they going to do differently than they did before? What are the warning signs?
Yeah.
Like if they start seeing themselves do this, or this, does that mean it's time to stop? And then what's the plan after that?
Yeah. And I remember working with a client who said, everyone on the apps is using crystal meth. And I'm like, well, now that's an interesting way of seeing it because in his experience, that's who he was hooking up with. So he didn't even know that there was a possibility of introducing or reintroducing sex into his life that wasn't connected with using. So again, there are so many layers, and I really want to acknowledge that you're saying like it's really what the individual is wanting, but also how do we help someone get in touch with what's authentically true, especially in early recovery when, yes, we're just thawing out. Yes, we're just, moving away from daily drug use or weekend drug use or whatever it is, to be able to even look within and ask ourselves the question, what does this look like for me and what is useful for me? And, what is a sexual ideal that I want for myself? This is what I'm going to do and not do. And if I find myself, there's the three rings when you think about sex addiction, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with that. Like these are the things that seem the most healthy for me, part of my recovery. This is where it starts to be a warning. And then this is where I consider myself not in my recovery behavior. How to navigate that with all the layers and with all the societal shame in general around sex.
It's tricky. It's really tricky. It's just like it's rife with pitfalls and landmines and some of the
What's
stuff.
the relationship? Because I want to kind of switch gears and yet not switch gears. What's the relationship between what we're talking about, either chemsex or early recovery, and how to like help someone navigate what is healthy sex? I'm happy to tell parts of my own story, my early recovery, but what's the relationship between that and shame? And, we know that with shame, we work with shame
Well,
very differently than guilt.
yeah. So the way I can answer that for myself, and so and for the clients that I have worked
Yeah.
with, it's like I've seen this come up time and time again. It's like we have Alan Downs has done really great work with the Velvet Rage. It's like, and part of what he talks about in that book is how repressed we become in early adolescence with how
Mhm.
much we hide our own sexuality, how much we push it down and push it down, um, not even consciously, right? It's just like we're aware that it's probably not safe. Like I came out as a young gay person in the late 70s, early 80s, terrifying time to
Yeah.
be out and gay. Um, but nobody told me it's not safe to be out and gay. I just knew I'm not going to talk to my dad about finding that boy attractive. I'm not going to talk to my friends about isn't he cute? Like I just like push it down. Um, so that builds that quietness, that repression builds and builds and builds. And so by the time I experienced crystal meth for the first time,
Mhm.
which was not until my late 40s,
Wow.
I had I had kept myself hidden from that, away from that drug, like it was the plague. And then this thing happened, and I ended up being exposed to it, and tried it, and immediately all of that shame went away. And I
Wow.
wasn't even aware that that's what was happening, but
That's
it was like that total absence of shame was the euphoria. It
right.
wasn't even necessarily the drug, it was this feeling of I've never had this before and I want more of this. And so I think for me and for a lot of us, the absence of shame is sometimes more addictive than the drug itself that kind of brought us there.
It is so true. And I think what you're saying, Carter, is so important. So I want to spend a little more time there because same for me. I had so much internalized shame and so much it was so deeply repressed. And, like you, same era coming out in late 70s, early 80s. I graduated from high school in 83, and I wasn't even out yet then completely. I had a close circle of male friends. We all turned out to be gay, but I mean, obviously we all were then and we all knew it. But even with each other, we weren't even talking about it. Even though I was in a relationship with one of them, we went to the prom together and took girls, like the layers upon layers. And also, like when you're talking about it not being conscious, and I think that's really important, and that is how shame actually thrives. I'm not even aware of it. I'm not aware of what I've absorbed from society. And like you, a little bit different story. I did crystal meth once. We didn't even call it crystal meth back then. We called it crank. But I did it one time, but I discovered ecstasy right
Mm.
around that time, right after high school, pretty much. And my whole world opened up and I could be free. And when you're talking about a substance that removes shame, I think that's really important to talk about because that's exactly my experience. And I think we tend to think of drugs as being the problem. We know that's not true. The problem is much more deeply rooted, and the drugs were a solution to that. And
Yeah.
then when we get sober, as even, no one, I say it this way, we don't call it an addiction as long as it's working, we call it fun. When the fun
Right.
stops, or when the
Yeah.
fun
Yeah.
starts to, have like issues with going to jail or losing our job or,
Mhm.
spending money on drugs. And oh gosh, am I telling my own story? I think I am. Not being able to pay the rent and all the things that go on. And for me, I was a young person doing all this, 18, 19, and 20. I got sober at 20. But when I got sober, I really honestly, Carter, didn't address the shame for many years. And I walked around just feeling really deeply broken and damaged. And I couldn't even necessarily identify that on a conscious level.
How'd you end up identifying it?
Well, what actually happened is around 18 months, I was suicidal. And the
Mm.
paradigm at the time sounded something like this. And I think some of our listeners or people watching will recognize this language, but this is literally what multiple people said to me. Don't worry about anything but not drinking. Your life is a miracle. No, go be of service. I mean, it was
Right.
back in the day. Go wash some ashtrays. And I'm like, I just told
Yeah.
you I want to die. So I met this woman named Mary Helen, and I really dedicate my life's work to her. She took me on a journey that allowed me in a beautiful and gentle way to start to unpack the trauma. And a big part of that was my trauma around being a little gay boy in Indiana in the
Wow.
1970s.
Yeah. That's same. I came to it later and I came to it really hard. Like I used really hard. But I had this experience where my brother, who is a younger gay man, he's 10 years younger,
Mm,
he had struggled with crystal meth and got clean and sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he took me to a meeting. I ended up staying clean and sober in that fellowship for a year, but never did any deep work
yeah.
at all, right? And so then I ended up deciding this doesn't feel good. I'm going to
Mm.
drink again. And so I decided to go to New Orleans and drink at Mardi Gras, which is like, hey, if you're going to go out big. And then met somebody who offered me crystal meth for the first time. And my brain thought, well, if you can quit drinking, which you've done before, you can quit this too.
Wow.
So no harm. Just try it, see what happens, and then off and running. And ended up coming back into treatment, coming back into recovery. Um, Worked in a different fellowship around that drug of choice. Didn't really do any deep work, never looked at shame, and
Yeah.
got to a point where I was going to kill myself. At the time, I had a 13-year-old son. He's
Mm.
now 25. And I was really thinking he didn't need me because he had three other parents. He had another dad and he had two moms. I remember thinking, like, I'm not contributing at all to society and I'm miserable. Like, I'm not drinking, I'm not using, and I'm miserable. So I'm just gonna kill myself. And the way I'm gonna do that is I'll just use so hard that I die.
Wow.
And I never did. And I kept using more and more, and I never did. And it's like, and ended up in treatment and recovery, and really had a therapist, a counselor who was gifted enough to start digging into the shame. And his focus was primarily around my relationship with straight men, which
Mm.
I never would have even thought about, but I had this experience where I was not going to men's group. There was a men's group every week, twice a week, and I was avoiding it like the plague. And he said, "Why do you keep avoiding men's group?" And I said, "Because I have sessions with you." And he said, "It's because you're asking to schedule them at the time that men's group is. Why are you doing that?" And I said, "Because, to be honest, I'm scared.
Yeah.
And I'm scared because when I came out, it was really not safe.
Yeah.
And that room is full of there was a cowboy in there. There's cowboys, firemen, policemen, lawyers, people that I was terrified of. And my story, there's sex in my story. There's stuff that they might think is gross in my story. Um, it doesn't feel safe." And he said, "What I want you to do is I want you to go to that group and I want you to tell them what you just told me." And some voice in my head just said, "Do that."
Yeah.
And I did. And afterwards, every one of these guys came up to me in some form or fashion and hugged me, told me they loved me, told me they had my back. And it's like last thing I expected. I thought maybe I'd get through it without falling apart. I didn't expect people to embrace me. And so this like brotherhood of men thing kind of emerged for me that I didn't know I could be a part of. And that um, really helped combat the shame for some reason, right? Being accepted by people that I was the most afraid of when I stepped through the fear of opening up about something that I had some shame around.
Wow, Carter, our stories are so parallel. So I too had so much fear of straight men, or men in general, honestly. But I remember accidentally walking into a men's meeting one time in my early recovery, and my entire body literally started shaking.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I sat down, and I don't even remember getting through that. But what I do remember from that is like, oh my gosh, I have some serious work to do on this. I don't know what that work is. Well, of course, intellectually, I can understand that, like, growing up. I remember a therapist asked me once, what was it like in high school or junior high school when you first start becoming sexual or aware of being a sexual being attracted to the very same boys who were calling you the F word? And I remember breaking down crying and just really understanding
Mm.
the gravity of that. And that's where not all of my shame formed, because a lot of it formed even earlier than that, but it intensified there. And it became an outward projection of men aren't going to accept me. I also, when I worked full time in treatment and I facilitated a lot of groups, I remember I was just in this group that happened to be all men. It wasn't a men's treatment program, nor was it a male focused group. It just happened to be all men. And there was one gay man in the group. And there was a bond that they all had where it was safe enough. And I think this is the important piece, because when I hear your story, I imagine that, yes, being accepted by them was part of feeling the shame. Quite possibly a bigger part was being able to be vulnerable and be witnessed in that vulnerability. And this gay client said, I know this isn't true, but I'm afraid if I talk about my boyfriend or something about sex or even something about being gay, one of you is going to hit me. And I remember that the guys in the group just being shocked, but also like the compassion that happened from that, because he acknowledged, like, I know all of you and I know you're safe, but my nervous system or my I don't
Yeah.
know it on every level. My body has not caught up with that. So I think there's a lot of layers to the way we heal in community in that way.
It's so beautiful when that breaks through though. Have you seen this series Heated Rivalry or any of it?
There's no way I've missed that.
Okay. So have you seen the podcasts of the straight men watching
I
Heated
have not,
Rivalry?
but I know about it.
Oh my God. It is the most healing thing I've ever experienced. One of the most healing things I've ever experienced is watching these ex-hockey players who have this podcast, their wives told them they should watch it. They watch it live and experience it as you're watching the podcast. And they're like bawling and they're crying and they're getting up out of the room because they can't take the emotional heaviness of it. And that that series is like, it's not hidden sexuality. There's no subtext. This is naked
Yes.
sexual, like raunchy-ish sex happening, but it's not facing them. They're connecting with the human story.
And
Of
what's interesting and fascinating, I'm glad we're talking about this. It's funny, in the last week's episode, we also talked about this show. It's very interesting. This is very current. Of course, by the time this airs, it won't be quite as current, but we're recording this right as this series is out and getting all the attention. But I was thinking about my own discomfort with watching those scenes, and then I remembered that, and I'm watching with my husband, like we're just watching this together, and it reminded me that for people, let's say, who are heterosexual or straight leaning, that's normal. That's something they see earlier in life. So that becomes a normal thing. That becomes, and I was
Mm.
thinking about gay representation. The movie Celluloid Closet is so great because it talks about early representation of LGBTQ folks. And, for our conversation, we're talking mostly about being gay men. And the characters were definitely not being portrayed in a loving and sexual and to even name it, even attractive men being gay, right? So like there
Right.
are so many layers to this and so much healing that can come from just that representation. And you referenced Alan Downs. Alan is a friend of mine, he might be of yours, but I love his book, The Velvet Rage, and it's made a profound impact. Some people, judge it as being dated. I get that it might be a little dated. It was written a long time ago, but the shame that's connected with sexual orientation is
Mm.
so current. That's not, it's just a powerful book.
Yeah, it really is. And I think even today it's very powerful. I think even I think about if I were being raised now, would it be different? And I think in some ways it might be different, but also there's just it's we like as humans, like we're I'm so looking for the thing that makes me different. I have this natural disposition to look for the thing that sets me apart from other people. And so even if I'm surrounded by the potential of acceptance, like there's still a high probability that I'm going to go into that shame corner instead of into the light.
That's right. And the thing that's for me that is so important, because we talked a little bit about how we heal shame and how it's different than guilt. Guilt is behavioral. Guilt is, I think I've done something wrong. I'm accountable for that. I make amends for that. That's why 12-step programs, it's a very important part of it. And I think it's really crucial for a person's recovery. And yet it doesn't actually necessarily address the shame because, we can do the amend process without actually addressing the shame. Shame requires a safe environment, whether that's one-on-one with a safe therapist or a sponsor or a coach or a counselor, or in a group setting where we're able to actually be authentic and reveal those parts of ourselves. And, you and I have worked in treatment for a long time, and we've seen that over and over again. And that's where the magic happens when, regardless of what we're talking about, when someone tells a part of their story that someone may or may not relate to, but it's safe just for them to bring that to the light. That's how we heal it. And honestly, that's the purpose of this particular podcast. And the reason that we continue to do it is that these conversations make a difference. Someone watching or listening right now may not realize that there's parts of their story they've never revealed, and those parts that are buried. It wasn't until I was in my graduate program when I was 40 years old that this was a very spiritually based program. So it was all about what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what's happening in our consciousness. And the last week of this 1 week long intensive, I was literally on the floor in the fetal position sobbing. And it was about my shame that hadn't been healed. And here I was, 20 years sober, 40 years old. I
Mm.
thought I had addressed this, but it was still buried very deep within me.
Yeah. Interesting. What do you think about like I really love the fact that we have treatment programs that are LGBTQI focused,
Yeah.
and that's the primary population that is in those programs, like Element Q. I think it's a really valuable.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think about your own experience with shame if you had had the opportunity to work that through with a mixed audience versus an audience that's just gay? Do you feel like there's a difference there, or is it just the fact that it's out in the open?
Yeah, I love this question. And I think like going back to what we said in the beginning, there's not a one size fits all. And the way I would draw a parallel is not all women should be in a women's only program necessarily, but there
Yeah.
are certain women who have certain experiences that's what's clinically relevant, right? So like at Element Q, yes, all of our clients are LGBTQIA plus identified, and there's a safety in that. And I've seen beautiful, healing, miraculous things happen in mixed populations. So I'm a big proponent that it's both and not either or. I actually heard someone from a LGBTQ treatment program that, by the way, is no longer LGBTQ, which is interesting, but said every LGBTQ client should only be in LGBTQ treatment. That is not true.
Not true.
However,
And-
there are certain people in certain populations or a certain time in their recovery that might be clinically relevant with the hope of integrating.
100%. I could not agree more. I think it's almost like when I think about coming into meetings, into 12-step meetings,
Mhm.
I myself was gravitated more towards the LGBTQI meetings.
Mhm.
I know other people that do that as well. It's almost like an entry drug, right? It's
Mhm.
like you're going to do the thing that gets you in the door, and sometimes people come into those meetings and they discover that NA is a safe place, AA is a safe place, CMA, these are safe places to be. I'm going to spread out from here.
Yeah,
And then my experience was I found the deeper recovery outside those meetings.
that's
Like I
right.
found more outside those meetings, because that's what my soul craved. My soul craved connections with the larger community because I had kept myself so like I can only I can only have authentic relationships with other gay men.
Yeah.
Like those are the only authentic relationships I can have. So then when I started having them with straight men and straight women and gay women, and it's like when all of that started to kind of blossom, I wanted more of that. And so
That's such a beautiful thing. And my experience was exactly the opposite. I was terrified of being in gay meetings. We could do a whole show on that. I'm not going to get into it because, believe it or not, we're actually at the end of our time. But
oh boy.
my experience was I went into what we would call mainstream meetings right away, and there were like two other gay people in the entire group, and I did that for 2 years. And for me, it was important then to integrate into gay meetings or to go be around people who were specifically gay men because all my fears that I had actually did come true. But even in that, it was still healing for me. So I think, again, there's not a one size fits all. And what I hear both of us saying is there's a time and a place for these different parts of our journey. And as someone in recovery who might be watching or listening, or someone who's considering being in recovery, or someone working in the field, or a therapist or a counselor, I think my takeaway from this conversation is there isn't a one size fits all, and to be curious and allow for ourselves or our clients to explore what's true for them is so important. So, Carter, I'm going to ask you in a moment if there is anything you want to say in closing, but I just want to say thank you for being on our show, and thank you I loved our conversation. I thought it went to some very interesting places, and I know when I do this show, I always feel filled up, and that means we're going to keep doing it. So I'm grateful. So is there anything you want to add or say in closing? Of course, your contact info will be in the show notes.
I thank you, by the way. Just thank you for asking me to have this conversation with you. And I've always appreciated your counsel, your advice, your support. So just thank you for being who you are and being such a force in this field. Shame sucks. That's that's what I just want to leave with really is that shame just sucks. And I think that If anything I've said or that you hear as somebody that's early in recovery, that sounds like shame or makes you feel shame, I just think really question it, because if you are somebody that's sex positive and polyamorous and promiscuous, there's got to be a better word than that. But if you are somebody who is really actively sexual, there's a place for you in recovery, and you can absolutely have all those things
Yeah.
and thrive in your recovery. If you're somebody that wants to be celibate for 4 years, like I was,
Yeah.
there's a place for you in recovery. Like that's it. There's a place for you, and there's a place absence of shame.
Yes, I love it. Well, Carter, thank you so much. And everyone who's watching or listening, if this episode has resonated with you, which I'm sure it has with many of you, please share it. Share it with someone who might be helped, because that's really why we're doing this. We're doing this to really spread the love and spread the infinite possibilities of how we individually and collectively can heal as a community. So thank you, everyone. Peace and blessings. Until the next time. And thank you, Carter. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Element Q podcast. It's an honor to walk this path of healing and transformation with you. Remember, the courage and resilience of those who came before us live on in each of us. Let's continue to carry their legacy forward as we support one another in creating a world filled with love, gentleness, and empowerment. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we're building a brighter future, one story at a time. Until next time, I'm TJ Woodward, and this has been the Element Q podcast.